We are starting with a super easy one, not complicated at all. But we had a divorce post, a post we wrote about divorce and how it damages kids. That went super viral. Probably one of our most looked at, shared. I mean, I think we're at 500,000 views and shares and all this stuff. And so there's been so many comments and messages and a lot of feedback from it. And a big piece of pushback is people saying, what about X as a reason for divorce? And so there's a number of things we address in the article. I think we call them the A's in Them Before Us. We talk about abuse, addiction, abandonment, adultery, which we would say in essence are all violations of the marriage covenant. At the very least, those would warrant some kind of separation and community around that offending party to try and get them to do the right thing prior to divorce. We would want that. But we do think it would be good for, us to kind of share a little bit more on our view of what are the good reasons for ethical reasons, let's say, for divorce. We're not saying your kids, it's not going to hurt your kids still. It will still hurt your kids. But there might be good, justified reasons to do it. So we're just going to unpack that a little bit. Katie, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, and whenever you have a post like that, you obviously get oh, but what about women who are being abused? That is a legitimate concern. And you sometimes will get comments from children of divorce who said, my parents' relationship was so fraught, so violent. There was so much conflict. I was relieved when my parents got divorced. That is also true. We do have studies showing that there is some measure of relief after a divorce when it has been high conflict or when it is very, very clear that the parents are warring with each other. Now, that is not the best outcome. The best outcome is, for the adults to grow the hell up and resolve their problems so it's not the kid's problem, either in a warring marriage or what is very often a warring divorce situation. But I want to talk a little bit about what do you do in situations of genuine abuse. And first, let's talk about all the ways that people say they're being abused, but they're not being abused. And Jen, you were kind of processing with this prior to hitting record. So tell us a little bit about why, just because somebody says, oh, there's abuse in my relationship, we don't necessarily go, oh, by all means, let's figure out a separation or divorce.
Yeah, one of the things that had occurred to me is the dad voice is like a thing, right? When mom asks you to go do the dishes or make your bed, sometimes the kids are like, la, 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 la. And when dad says it in a very stern, strong way, kids often perk up and go do the thing they've been asked to do. I do think there is a difference in obviously there's a difference in how men and women communicate. I think there's a reason. I think it's Paul. I forget which book said basically men are told to be gentle. And I think there's an understanding of men typically are physically much bigger. They could hurt you if they want to. And I think that's why they need to have an extra measure of understanding how their voice and their posture, and if I'm looming over you and I'm upset, needs to be considered when there's arguments. But I could understand how someone in a moment where there's a lot of anger and tension is feeling like, whoa, he's being aggressive. I don't feel safe in this moment. He lost his temper and he called me names that people call things. And I don't even know the good definitions for emotional abuse and mental abuse or spiritual abuse. There's lots of things that can fit into those categories. I don't think we would say it's only abuse if you're physically being hurt. But those things are also hard to define. And I think there's been a lot of women that have cried wolf and used it as a way to make the guy look like a bad guy to get out of it so they could go live their life. We see those divorce reels, right? So it is a hard thing to navigate, but we also don't want to say, well, if you're saying it's abuse, it's probably just that you got into it with each other, and it's not.
Yes. So what I want to talk about is cases of true abuse. And they're not as common as you think if you're just looking at, like you said, all of the Instagram reels of women who are like, liberate yourself from your husband who doesn't do the dishes as much as you want him to do. It's abusive because he blah, blah, blah. No, like abuse is really, it does have objective definitions, both emotionally and physically. So I'm going to talk now more as a pastor's wife than a child activist because most of the people that I know, okay, every married couple that I know, except for some of the ones that are like 30 and older who have kind of worked it out, they all have to figure out some way of being together in a situation, they have to resolve conflict. They have to get over personality differences. They often have to deal with childhood baggage. One or both of them are going to have some kind of mental health challenge or some kind of like addiction issue, whether it's porn or whatever. Every marriage has to deal with those kinds of things, period. And so every couple has to figure out how to deal with conflict. I'm not going to talk about those marriages right now. I'm going to talk about the marriages where there really is one spouse who is genuinely abusive or a genuine narcissist. And I say this because every woman who wants to get out of her marriage, not every, many will just say he's a narcissist. No, he's not. You are saying that because you're trying to justify an escape from what is probably an uncomfortable situation, but not an abusive situation. But I want to talk with you about genuine abuse and a genuine manipulative narcissistic, and let's say in this case husband, because it's the wives that I tend to talk to more than the men. Okay, there are manipulative narcissistic women. I'm going to talk about the men. What does a woman do in that situation? Well, the truth is she's totally cooked if she is alone. If she is the only person that is saying, I don't like this isn't right, I need some boundaries, she is not enough to reform his behavior. And that is probably not enough for her to get a just response from a judge as it relates to a separation. Because here's the problem with someone who's genuinely abusive or genuinely narcissistic. Your kids are going to spend 50% of the time with him. They're just going to do it without the buffer of you being there to contextualize, to correct, to call out. And so the woman needs other men. And the truth is those men are going to be found at church. The woman must go to the elders and pastors of the church. So everyone's thinking, but what if they don't have a church? But what if I go to a bad church? Those are both problems. So the answer is now, before you're married, before there's problems, you find a great church with leaders you can trust, because you will need their help. Not just if you get into an abusive marriage situation. My husband and I have needed help in our marriage or in our life to resolve questions that we are having, not even just in our marriage, but in our work life or in terms of dealing with extended family members. You are going to need trustworthy people that you can go to give you good counsel and maybe help enforce boundaries. So ladies, if you are in that situation, you have a husband who is narcissistic, manipulative, abusive, you have to have other good men. So this is my recommendation. As a woman who has been in ministry for close to 3 decades, what needs to happen there is other men need to come and establish the matter. You need to document the ways that he is manipulating, the way that he's trying to gaslight, maybe the ways that he has been abusive, even if he has not laid a hand on you. Have there been threats? Has he talked about like, well, what would you do if I just pulled a gun right now? I mean, you have got to establish that, ladies, with other men that can hold him accountable. You are not enough. And then the men need to confront him. They need to say, it is no longer your wife you're dealing with us. We are the one that are going to insist that you go get treatment. Otherwise, we will say you need to move out of the house. We are siding with your wife. Or they will say, you are the one that must repent for this addictive behavior to your wife. You cannot hide it from us. We already know. We have documented it. We have gone through the processes of asking, confirming, and then seeing the repeated cycle. The men have to get on the side with the wife. She is not enough. And then if there is a separation or a split, they must side with the woman. They go to him and they say, this church is for her. It is not for you. You are welcome to come back when you meet these requirements. And then the men, the elders of the church and the pastors have to set objective standards. What does that mean? A certain level of sobriety, accountability once a week with men that are going to say, what have you said to your wife? What have you done to your wife? How have you behaved in front of your children? You answer to us. It's no longer the wife's job to police or even identify the damaging behavior. That has to be for the men to do. So all of you guys are thinking, oh my gosh, but I don't have a community like that, or what husband does. Yes. Now you all understand why God instituted the church, because there are things that individuals and even families can't do on their own. They need a community of men.
I do think there's just a lack of understanding. I love what you're saying. It's so good. It's like making me feel like, man, that's so empowering for good men to be the ones standing up to protect women, right? But I think there's so many people that don't understand that. And the woman maybe doesn't, men might not understand that if you're in counseling together, the woman might not be able to tell you what's going on. I think that's what I don't understand is if you're sitting together and you're saying he is doing XYZ, you leave together and you go back to the house together, there could be consequences of sharing. I think that's what maybe some elders and lay people who don't understand all the dynamics of it. I think there needs to be a like, let's hear what he has to say separately. Let's hear what she has to say separately. If it's like these stories are completely different and this husband's like, no, she's actually physically abusing me, and maybe there's more things that need to be dug into, I get it. But if she's like, I'm scared to be home alone with him because I don't know if he's going to let me leave the house, I think that puts a different urgency on the men. So I think, like you're saying, there needs to be more fact finding and for men to just take it so seriously, understanding the difference in terms of the physical power that one has over the other. It's not to say, like we said, women can be physically abusive, manipulative, narcissistic, hide money, do all those same things. But it does feel a little different in terms of urgency of, am I scared to even say anything because what could happen to me when I leave the pastor's office?
I know that people are listening to this going, but what about this? But what about that? But what about in this kind of situation? And the answer is that is not something that can be answered on a radio show because there's a million different factors. It can be answered by people who know both of you well and under whose authority God has given to protect their flock and protect their congregation. There is no substitute. There's no book of advice. There's no just golden rule that's going to sort this out for you. It will only happen through timeless godly principles enacted and interpreted by people who love you and who are going to hold you to a standard. So there's no substitute for church. I'm sorry. And if you're not a Christian, go to church anyway. Go to church. You need the people.
And there's no substitute for good men. I think men who they're, not to say that I don't think a man wakes up one day and thinks, I'm going to start abusing my family. I think there's probably many factors in there. There could be anger issues and unresolved things and abuse from his childhood and struggles with work, struggles with addiction. But it's
Or
not,
a
yeah,
misunderstanding of what it means to lead your household,
yeah,
or a misunderstanding of what it means to have even Christian men can have an improper understanding of what it means to have, a wife and children who are not out of control.
yeah.
Like, it doesn't mean that there's no toys on the stairs at home. It means that there's order in the home. I mean, there's so many different ways where men need other good men applying biblical principle to their life in a way that is loving and forceful.
Yeah. It's not to demonize men but it's to say there has to be the accountability and brothers that come alongside to protect the sister and to encourage and call the man to something higher and better. And that the goal would be, even if there has to be separation, the goal would be that there would be health and then a restoration and a better marriage, and that they wouldn't feel like we have to hide when we're struggling in our marriage. Now people know us, they know what we've gone through, they're keeping him accountable for the addictive behaviors, whatever. When he feels like he's going to fall or struggle, he can turn to those brothers versus, some people want to demonize and, kick him out and get divorced, but that shouldn't be the first step. And we're hoping to get to people sooner, to get the help you need sooner. So we don't get to this breaking point of like, we can't even be in the same place because it's not physically safe for us and our children. If the church could be involved in helping way sooner.
I saw a Facebook announcement of a new relationship status of a woman who had been married to a guy. They are not part of our church anymore, but they were for a long time. They got to, I don't know, high school kids at this point. And she just announced a relationship with an old high school flame, I guess. I had no idea that their marriage was in trouble. I mean, they're not in my social circle anymore, but even their friends who are still with them, they were like, we were totally shocked. And, when we said, what on earth is going on? We thought that you guys were in this healthy, thriving Christian marriage. She said, oh, we've had problems for a long time. But she didn't tell anybody about the problems for a long time. She didn't bring other people into the equation until she was at her breaking point. And I understand that, like, a lot of us have a hard time talking about the challenges in our marriage. but it's death. Death for your marriage, death for the home that your children share with both of their parents. I'm sorry, but if there's problems, you have an obligation, not just to yourself, but to your spouse and to your kids to get help sooner rather than later. Because sometimes it does get to that point where now there's so much layers and problems and wounds that it's hard to see a way out. There always is. But if you can start sooner, the better. And you need a community of people to do that.